All right, today we're going to play detective. We're diving into a psychological mystery that's over a century old. The really strange case of the things our own minds, well, refuse to remember. You know that feeling, right? You're grasping for a name, a place, a simple word. It's right there. You can almost taste it, but you just can't pull it out. It's one of the most common and frustrating experiences we all have. But what if it's not just a random glitch? Now, that is the radical idea that absolutely fascinated the pioneers of psychology. The idea that some forgetting isn't passive, like a memory just fading away. No, this is an active, motivated process. Your own mind deliberately shoving a memory into a closet because it's tied to something unpleasant. So, Sigmund Freud was the one who first really put a name to this. He called it repression. He argued that we all have this tendency to push away what's unpleasant. But here's the thing, that was a theory based on his observations. It needed proof. It needed a real experiment. And that's where a young, incredibly ambitious psychiatrist named Carl Jung comes in. See, before he became the legend we know today, he was an experimentalist. He was on the hunt for a way to actually map the unconscious, and he believed he could find hard evidence for Freud's theory using a very specific tool, the word association test. So, how did it work? Well, the method itself was deceptively simple. I say a word, let's say water. You immediately say the very first thing that pops into your head. Maybe ocean, maybe thirsty, and all the while, I'm timing you with a stopwatch. Jung was convinced that the speed and the nature of these responses could literally reveal the hidden landscape of the mind. And as Jung started running these tests over and over, he began to notice these strange patterns. Certain words would just throw a wrench in the works. They'd cause these odd reactions, these little hiccups in the normal flow. He started to see them as clues, almost like fingerprints left behind by some hidden emotional turmoil, which he called a complex. So, what were these telltale signs? Well, a subject might take a really, really long time to respond. Or they'd give a totally bizarre answer. Sometimes they'd even forget the word you had just said a second ago. Jung realized these weren't just random mistakes. They were signals that the word had just poked a raw nerve. But Jung knew he had to dig deeper. He needed a way to prove that these little disturbances were directly linked to memory, to motivated forgetting. So he devised his ingenious follow-up, a second stage to his experiment that he called the reproduction method. And the real genius of this next step was its simplicity. After running through a whole list of about 100 words in the first test, Jung would go through the exact same list again. But this time, he'd asked the person to recall their original answer. See the difference? It was a simple, direct test of their memory. This, right here, was the million-dollar question. If somebody couldn't remember what they'd said before, was it just a random slip? Or, and this is the key, would the forgotten words systematically cluster around those emotionally charged complexes he'd already flagged? This was his chance to find out. To prove his theory, Jung didn't just rely on numbers. He documented everything in these incredible, detailed case studies. We're going to look at two of them, where this whole phenomenon of motivated forgetting is on full, fascinating display. Okay, so the first subject was a professional musician who was just plagued by anxiety. He had this whole history of messy relationships, including a recently broken engagement and a secret affair. Basically, his life was full of emotional landmines. And when the results came in, wow, it was stunning. When Jung analyzed the reproduction test, he found that, with very few exceptions, the words the musician failed to remember were precisely the ones that had shown signs of a complex. They were the words connected to his romantic failures, his anxieties, his past. The forgetting wasn't random, not at all. Now, if you thought that was interesting, the second case is even more dramatic. It's a 22-year-old man described as excitable and sensitive who had a history of getting into duels and having all these secret love affairs. He was a patient at a mental hospital where Jung was working. So Jung noticed something really fishy in his results. Words like to kiss or at night were causing these long, suspicious delays. But look at that last one. The stimulus is to pay attention, and the patient says lecture, but it takes him 6.2 seconds. I mean, that's an eternity in this kind of test. Something was definitely going on. Let's just focus on that number for a second. 6.2 seconds. Jung suspected that the patient had started a new, secret affair behind the hospital's back. He thought that the instruction to pay attention during a lecture he was allowed to attend was somehow linked to a secret meeting, but he had no proof. Jung knew these reaction times were like a map leading to a secret, but what was it? The patient, of course, denied everything, and for a moment, it really seemed like the trail had gone cold. And then they found the smoking gun. They intercepted a letter. It was from a girl planning a secret rendezvous with the patient. The test hadn't just been accurate, it had acted like a psychological lie detector. It revealed the very secret the patient was trying so hard to hide. With this kind of rock-solid evidence, Jung could finally draw a powerful conclusion. The failure to remember isn't just something that happens to us. In these cases, it's something the mind does. It's an action. It's a process of pushing something away. And you know what? The hard data backed him up completely. When Jung crunched the numbers and calculated the average reaction times, he found that the words the subjects later remembered correctly took about 3 seconds to respond to, but the words they forgot, those took on average 5 seconds. That extra delay was the statistical fingerprint of the emotional struggle taking place under the surface. And this process now had a name and, more importantly, experimental backing: repression. It's the mind's own defense mechanism, right? An unconscious effort to keep distressing or threatening stuff out of our conscious awareness, all to reduce anxiety. And this is why Jung's experiment was such a game changer. Freud had this brilliant theory about repression, but Jung, with his simple stopwatch and his word lists, provided the very first concrete, measurable, experimental evidence that it was a real, observable phenomenon. He literally took it from the philosopher's couch to the scientist's lab. So it all leaves us with this fascinating and maybe kind of unsettling final thought, doesn't it? We all have those moments of forgetting, but after seeing Jung's work, you have to wonder, which of those moments are just random slips, and which are the subtle, active work of our own minds, hiding secrets even from ourselves? What parts of your own story are being actively pushed away, just waiting to be rediscovered?